with Men Engage Alliance, and as well as the person who's responsible for the portfolio of meaningful youth engagement and participation across the Alliance. We're so excited to have all of you join us together for this wonderful collaboration that is between Men Engage Alliance and the Youth Reference Group, the Yield Up, Athena Network in Gender Health, to bring to you this space for us to have a conversation of how we can look at issues around gender transformative approaches and how they apply or they reflect to the issues of advancing youth partnership and adolescent youth sexual and reproductive health and rights. So with me today, I'm going to have a quite strange program, but I do hope we're going to all have space to participate, interact, and engage together. So we're going to kickstart this with setting the pace, which is already something that Dina was helping me to do with the logistics. So feel free to use the interpretation that we have so that we have the language that you need for you to be able to participate. We have the question and answer chat box that is available for your comments, for your reflections, and also for your questions. And as we go along with our program, when I introduce the panelists for the panel discussion, please feel free to address any questions in the question and answer chat box to the specific panelists that you'd like them to respond on. So to kickstart our program, I'm going to invite two young people who are going to give an introduction to the two host organizations, that is Men Engage Alliance and Healed Up, so that you also understand the background of where we are coming from and what has motivated us to be able to plan for this kind of a conversation together. So allow me to invite my first speaker to give us an introduction on setting the pace, and I'll invite Kapila Rathnayaka, who is the Youth Reference Group member for Men Engage Alliance from Pakistan. And I would like to invite you, Kapila, to give an introduction to the Men Engage Alliance and the Youth Reference Group member. Over to you, Kapila.
Thank you, Naisha, and I hope everybody can hear me. And good evening from Sri Lanka. And I'd like to invite you all. You can say good evening, good afternoon, or good morning from your country. And I think you can switch on your microphone and just let's share our gratitude together and wishes together. And when I say 1, 2, 3, we can say good evening or good morning or good afternoon from your country, your place. 1, 2, 3.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Buen día.
Buen día, Ecuador.
Buen día,
Okay.
Bolivia.
Good morning from Bolivia. Good morning from Ecuador.
From Sri Lanka, we are normally wishing for everybody, like we are saying Aibowan. Aibowan stands for wishing you good life expectation. So then I like to say you all Aibowan from Sri Lanka, and welcome to our webinar. And I'm representing Men Engage Alliance Youth Reference Group. So we are socially changed. We are a social change network working to transform patriarchal masculinities. As a global community, we engage men and boys in women's rights, gender justice, and for gender equality. We envision a world where all people are equal and free from discrimination. And especially Youth Reference Group is a collection of young people, young leaders, youth representatives from different regions of Men Engage. Around the world, we have different regions, and they are representing different local communities, as well as we have regional representatives for Men Engage Youth Reference Group. So we work as a local and regional collective network for Men Engage initiatives. So Men Engage believe youth leadership and our contributions should be valued and respected. And therefore, we were able to develop our youth strategy for 2021 and 2024, and it captures the aspirations of Men Engage Alliance Youth Reference Group. So I would like to share with you all our principles and values. One is youth leadership. So Men Engage believe that we must be equal partners in all decision making that affects us. And also when it comes to youth participation, it includes meaningful participation in programs and policies that seek to transform patriarchal masculinities and create socially and gender just societies. And also we work for transforming patriarchal masculinities. We strive to challenge the discriminatory and unequal power relations and harmful gender norms and stereotypes that perpetrate violence. And we will continuously re-educate ourselves and unlearn and influence of patriarchy in our lives as young people, because we also, as an activist or as a young people, we also have to re-educate ourselves, because we are also part of this patriarchal system. Because of the traditional norms and belief system, we also have to always reflect our actions, our behavior as young people or as a human being in this planet. So, and also we believe allyship and accountability. As a youth reference group and Men Engage, we are committed to gender justice, and we advocate in support of the progressive agendas of women's rights, feminist, climate, LGBTIQ, and other social justice groups and movements. And we strive to work in partnership with other young people and adults from diverse gender and social justice movements at the local, national, regional, and international levels. So our commitment to gender and social justice is informed by respect for the human rights of all. So we engage men and boys for gender transformative change using feminist and transnational intersectional approaches. So we are an inclusive community. We are strengthened by the participation of young women and girls, men and boys, and people of all genders, as well as by the participation of people of all sexual orientations and ethnicities. So this is basically what I have in my bucket to share with you from Men Engage. And as youth reference group members, we always come to take decisions of Men Engage, and we are part of the decision-making bodies as well. And also regional and local levels, we always try to relearn, unlearn, as well as re-establish new norms and patterns for the prevention of violence against women and girls, and for the prevention of gender-based violence. For we believe justice and peace, as well as kind, as well as respectful lives in our communities. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you so much, Kapila, for giving us a highlight of what Men Engage Alliance is all about and all the great work that you are doing to amplify the voices of young people within the Alliance. And let me also take this opportunity to really acknowledge your contributions. Kapila was also one of the young people who was representing Men Engage Alliance and the young people during the actual first ever action learning cycle on the gender issue paper. And we're so excited that through this kind of interaction, it has brought us actually to this space where we're able to coordinate a webinar and really get to share the kind of opportunities, the experiences and reflections that we had within the action learning cycle, and how we are taking forward the agenda of transforming masculinities, but also from a gender transformative approach. So thank you so much, Kapila. At this stage, I would like to invite Richard Zikunu, who is the action learning group leader or action learning groups leader from Yield Up, to also share with us reflections and highlights of what the Yield Up is all about and what kind of work that they've been doing. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Nasha. So yes, just a brief presentation also from the Yield Hub. So my name is Richard Jukunu. I'm the Action Learning Groups lead for the Yield Hub. And I support with all of our action learning processes, especially onboarding organizations to become part of the action learning cycle and supporting them to benefit from the cycle and to be able to, identify what their own challenges are, issues are, and collectively learn and share, but most importantly, develop their own action plans on how they would want to solve some of these challenges. So if it's your first time getting to know about the Yield Hub, we work to improve young people's partnership in adolescent and youth sexual and reproductive health rights. And so that's our primary goal. We focus on partnership. And we do this by facilitating action learning processes and influencing norm change. And so I use the term partnership, and for the hub, we do have a specific definition that we use. And we say that partnership is an equitable, mutually respectful, and beneficial relationship between all actors, including young people. And so when we say all actors, it means, INGOs, donors, those in the academic field, implementers, they are all part of it. And young people also form an essential part of this component. So one may ask, how do we then use action learning, which is our approach? So we use action learning, which is a problem-solving method to generate innovative solutions, to develop new and creative ideas in the field of AY SRHR. And so we do convene different organizations, which Men Engage Alliance has been part of in our first cycle, also in Gender Health, Athena Network, who are all here today. We convene this action learning cycles to help organizations reflect on their own challenges and issues, but also work with them to change some practices in ways that support and strengthen youth partnership. And so that is more of what the hub we do focus on. Now, over the past year, we have had some action learning cycles running. The first group, which was focused on, the issues of gender, which is quite also our topics for today, on gender transformation, but also how organizations strengthen their own work, whether from an intersectional approach or also looking at it from a more institutional approach. So we did work with different institutions. We had, I've mentioned some of them already, and Gender Health, Men Engage Alliance, Athena Network, Kami Fund, and Restless Development. And over the past months, we've seen how these groups, have learned and generated their own action plans, which some of them are currently implementing to help reduce the gender equity gap among the young people they work with within their institutions. But it's also helping them to strengthen their own program planning, their own implementation, and how they work and partner with young people. So these organizations do have different goals. We are also having our second action learning cycle, which is ongoing, which is also focused on the topic of measurement of youth partnership. How do we measure youth partnership? And again, we've been fortunate to be joined by different organizations who are very active in the field of youth partnership. We do have Radcare, Copperos, AMREF Africa, the Touchlight Collective, and IPPF, which is the International Planned Parenthood Federation. And so we also do have an independent consultant who is part of this group. And again, we are focusing on the topic of youth partnership. How do we strengthen youth partnership to ensure that it's equitable, mutually respectful, and beneficial, particularly to young people who are involved. And so over the past 4 months, let's say 5 months, we have been working with these organizations to come up with their own, action learning goals on some of the key challenges they face within their own work when it comes to youth partnership. Some of these organizations are focusing on developing new complementary indicators to better measure partnership, and not just the quantity of partnerships they have, but the quality of it. Some are also working on reviewing the numerous toolkits and resources they have, and wondering how do we make this useful to other organizations who may not have such resources. And so, because other organizations may need some of these tools and resources to better understand how to improve their own partnership. And we have some organizations as well who are thinking more broadly within the donor landscape on what do donors think about when it comes to partnerships. What are the measurement metrics that they look at? And so they are also working on action learning goals that would potentially try to work with donors to see how they can improve their own metrics of measurement when they look at the issues of youth partnership. So overall, that is what the Youth Hub is about. We focus on action learning to strengthen youth partnership. And just to sum up, we have had some members of our action learning group who have shared, what the action learning group has been doing for them. And this is really important to us at the Hub to see what progress is. For example, Kapila had mentioned with Men Engage Alliance, we have worked with you and we continue to work with you to, begin to think around how to strengthen your youth reference group in particular how to strengthen them to be able to impact decision within the Men Engage Alliance and governance structure. And so we've seen that through action learning, you've gone ahead, to review some of your existing work with the youth reference group, trying to strengthen them through capacity building, but also strengthen the coordination. And so these are things that we have seen our action learning group members do. We also do, for instance, have other action learning group members like gender health, who are also focusing more on intersectionality and inclusion, and how to be more intentional when engaging with different partners. And internally, they are also working on different resources and toolkits to make this work. Again, Athena Network, we've also seen how they are engaging actively in one of their flagship programs on what girls want. And again, action learning being that stepping stone to help them do more reflections around how to better implement this. And we've worked to develop some, outcome documents that we hope to potentially work with all of these organizations for those who may need funding, for those who may need collaboration, and those who may need, further resources and toolkits to work with them to get this done. So this is what action learning is about, and this falls within the broad work of the Youth Hub. So thank you very much, Nasha, and over to you now.
Thank you so much, Richard, for sharing with us what the Healed Up is all about. And I guess this is really the exciting times that we're in, where we get to see spaces being created for co-creation and collaboration, and spaces to adapt different methodologies that we can use to come together collaboratively to be able to advance the needs and the rights of adolescents and young people, and even the participation and meaningful engagement of adolescents and young people when it comes to sexual and reproductive health and rights. So once again, thank you so much, Kapila and Richard, for the introduction. So we're going to move on with our program, and at this stage I'll be introducing the panelists that I have for today, and I'll also be sharing the first question that I have for them, which they will use to reflect. And once again, I'll invite all of you who are here joining us today to also use the question and answer chat to continue sharing your reflections, your thoughts, your comments around gender transformative approaches. How realistic can we make them? How possible are they in the SRHR field, so that we can be able to advance this agenda? So please kindly ensure that you also engage with us through the question and answer chat. So I would like to introduce to you the panelists that I have for today. And I would like to introduce Ana Aguilera, who is the Director of Adolescent Youth Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights from Engender Health. Ana, I think you can quickly just say hi to people, and then I move on to the next person.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Ana. I'd like to also introduce to you Ola Abagun, who is the Executive Director of Athena Network. Ola, please kindly say hi.
Always struggling with my mute button. Hello, everyone. Good to see some familiar names and faces. Lovely to be here.
Thank you so much, Ola. Kuraish Mbiru, who is the Executive Director of Uganda Young Positives and also a member of the Men Engage Alliance Youth Reference Group. Say hi, Kuraish.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure being with you here, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kuraish. I'd also like to share again that for anyone else who is not speaking, who is not on the panel, please kindly ensure you stay on mute. So for the first question, I am going to ask my panelists to kindly reflect on this question that we have for them today. So I'll start with Ola. So in your context, which could be organizational, personal, or where you come from, could you please share your understanding of gender transformative approaches, how it has evolved over time, and what examples can you share to show it's needed and indeed it is a reality? Over to you, Ola.
Thank you very much, Nyasha. I think that's a critical question and a great starting point for our conversation today. When we talk about gender transformative approaches, people tend to sort of ask, like, what's that? Is it one of the new gender-related buzzwords? Or, you know, what are we actually talking about? And I would say that I had the opportunity to go deeper into trying to define what gender transformative approaches are in 2021, when I was opportune to work as a consultant with UNICEF, UN Girls Education Initiative, and Plan International to develop a brief on gender transformative approaches to education. And in the process of developing that brief, you know, talking to young people about what they thought the concept of gender transformative education is, and what gender transformative approaches actually are in general, we got to agree that as a global feminist movement, okay, I can hear myself. I wonder why, but I'll just try to go ahead. We got to, you know, agree that as a global feminist movement, our goal is gender equality, which is the equal enjoyment of resources, opportunities, and rights by everyone, regardless of their gender, whether they identify as men, whether they're women, girls, boys, whether they're gender, you know, diverse, they belong to gender minorities, and all of that. Right? And layering an intersectional approach, that is an approach that lets us know that apart from gender, there are other factors as well that lead to inequalities, and we cannot afford to deal with gender inequalities in isolation. So talking about HIV status, for instance, talking about disabilities, race, class, and all of those, you know, other considerations. So in addressing these gender inequalities and inequalities more broadly, we need to agree on what our approach is, right? How do we view these inequalities, and how do we view solutions to these inequalities? And how the concepts have evolved in terms of approaches so far is that we started by saying we need to be gender sensitive, right? And gender sensitivity just means recognizing that, you know, women, men, individuals, regardless of whatever gender they identify as, are different and have different needs, right? So in terms of statistics, this is where research sort of came to be in terms of gender-related research, right? Telling us that, you know, for instance, girls are more susceptible to acquiring HIV. About 4,900 girls every week between the ages of 15 and 24 acquire HIV in sub-Saharan Africa. So that means the burden of HIV is largely on girls. And, you know, education, comprehensive sexuality education, teenage pregnancies, how gender affects all of these issues, right? That is being gender sensitive, acknowledging these issues, acknowledging the differences, acknowledging the needs, but not necessarily going a step further to address them, right? And then beyond gender sensitivity, we said we need to go further, we need to push the button. And we came up with the concept of being gender responsive, right? Responding to the needs, the different needs of people, of individuals, depending on, you know, their gender and how that affects their worldview and their situation, right? And you can see several initiatives popping up to sort of close that gap. For instance, some people provide menstrual health, menstrual hygiene products to girls so that girls can stay in school. That is an example of a gender responsive approach, right, to SRHR interventions. And then now we're saying that there is still more we can do. So the concept of gender transformative approaches is that we're going beyond responding to the needs of individuals based on their gender to actually uproot the root cause of gender inequality. So we're looking at power, how power dynamics are sort of reflecting in the society and reflecting through SRHR as well, SRHR access, SRHR services and needs. And we're also looking at how we can ensure that we sort of upset the imbalance, we upset the inequalities based on gender. And an example I can use of a gender transformative approach to adolescent and youth SRHR is the radical inclusion policy in Sierra Leone in Western Africa, where the government came up with a policy that made it more enabling for pregnant girls, pregnant school-going girls, and parenting girls as well to complete their education. Prior to that, they were not allowed to sit for exams, to go to school. But the government came up with a really strong policy that was radical to uproot all of those inequalities, to reduce stigma, to provide comprehensive sexuality education, and really revamp how we see sexual and reproductive health and gender equality in that context of girls' education. I know my time is up, but I hope I've been able to do justice to how the concept of gender transformative approaches have evolved and some key examples around that. Hopefully we get to share more as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ola. And what I get from this is really the unpacking of the understanding from a feminist perspective of what is the journey towards gender transformative approaches, starting in how we are being sensitive, then we become responsive, and then how we look now at the root causes and say, hey, let's step back and uproot all those inequalities for young people to really enjoy their sexual and reproductive health and rights. Thank you so much, Ola. So I will also invite Kraish at this stage to also just reflect with us on your own understanding in the context of gender transformative approaches and how you see it has evolved over time and what examples you can share with us. Over to you, Kraish.
Thank you very, very much. And I'd like to take it on from my previous speaker. Gender transformative approaches, to us as men and boys, we think it is the best way to go. Why? Because it helps us start reflections, but also understanding that using such approaches don't only benefit women and girls. They benefit young men, they benefit boys, they benefit men in general. And we have seen processes that have been done and continue to be done up to date to ensure that all groups, all genders recognize, appreciate the need for diversity, equality, and inclusion, including men and boys. And for us as allies in the Men Engage Alliance, but also as partners in the Men Engage space, we see that as an opportunity to work with men and boys as equal partners of women and girls, and also be part of the solution to problems that mainly affect women and girls. The pre-current speaker mentioned about HIV and other vices that mainly affect women and girls. HIV, teenage pregnancy, forced early marriages, etc. These are mainly perpetuated by men and boys. And therefore, for us, we see gender transformative approaches as entry points for us to change that narrative, as entry points that can help us, bring men to be part of the solution, but also appreciate diversity, appreciate equality, and appreciate inclusion. We also see gender transformative approaches as a mechanism of us adopting and supporting the feminist movement and agenda and solidarity. We've, over time, seen the feminist movement as a movement that only tries to promote, the female agenda. No, with gender transformative approach, we want to be part of the solution. Everyone, every human being, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of their backgrounds, regardless of their status, it is important for them to adopt and also support the feminist movement, agenda, and solidarity. We also continue to learn and also know that it is important for us to foster the agenda of transforming masculinities. And we don't only target men in this, but we target men and boys in their diversity and collaborating together with women and girls as equal partners, as allies, as members that can be part of the solutions in transforming masculinity. And therefore, for me, that is how I understand gender transformative approach. That is how we work together as the Men Engage Alliance, especially the youth reference group, to ensure that the gender transformative approach is shared across the different spectrums, is appreciated and taken to scale by men, women, young people, and everyone in the cycle. Thank you very much, Nisha, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Kraish, and for really reflecting your context and highlighting that in most cases, it's about thinking about how we are creating opportunities for collaborating, realizing that using or adopting gender transformative approaches in our work, it's actually an entry point for us to change the narratives. Again, just like what Ola suggested, that we're going to uproot and change these narratives that we have around young people, sexual and reproductive health and rights, and also at the same time appreciating the diversity. I'll move on to Ana Aguilera. If you could also share with us in your context, what is your understanding of gender transformative approaches, maybe in the work that you do with all the experience that you have? And also, what are some of the practical examples that you can share with us to help us really contextualize gender transformative approaches in the sexual and reproductive health rights space? Over to you, Anna.
Thank you very much. And not to repeat what my brilliant other panelists have said, maybe 3 points to emphasize on my side in terms of adding to the conversation. I think the first and is maybe a recognition that many a times we have such good intentions, and we is the collective, SRHR, or even generally global health community. Good intentions don't always translate to good impact. And in fact, I think we must, in order to talk about gender transformative approaches, we also have to recognize that a lot of the well-intentioned work that we've done in the past needs to be called out. And I'm the first to do that with our organization. We've had over the last 5 years a real change in and recognition of sometimes we have been promoting approaches that we believe, are a good idea that end up creating unintentional harm. And I think that's the first thing I want to emphasize. Like, we are all in positions where we must constantly think about very thoughtfully our do no harm framework, which is, I think, key to any work related to gender or youth transformative approaches. The idea that we must have in place robust frameworks and approaches and activities that really look at what happens if harm occurs, because a lot of the things we're talking about really are putting the people we work with potentially at harm. And so we need to be really, really careful. And I'll give you an example of this. In the past, in our space, in gender health, but also other organizations in our space and other big initiatives, there was a time where we were trying to promote male engagement and including men so that they would participate in family planning, decision-making, or contraceptive care, for example. So some ideas and approaches that we quickly realized were creating harm and we've addressed right away was the idea that, okay, what if we provide an incentive or create a more enabling environment for women particularly to bring their partners to antenatal care or to the health facility. There was the idea that, in some communities, men spend a lot of time working, and so they can't come to the facility for whatever reason. So what if we create with the ministries of health and health facilities a specific space or an area where you can pass the queue, right? Go faster and access care if you come with your partner. And again, the intention was, let's engage men and boys in a way so that they're involved in the decision-making process, and that we are facilitating a space for couples to make more equitable decisions, right? But the unintended harm that came from that is, when we did that, we recognized, and a lot of others did as well, that despite the positive intention of improving access to things like institutional family planning, we created a situation where what happened to those girls and women and other folks who could not didn't have a partner, or whose partner didn't want to come, or who were in a situation of domestic violence and where it wasn't safe for them to come. So I use this example not because it's unique to Engender Health or even to a particular country or context, but because this is really important to emphasize why we have do no harm frameworks, and adding to my panelists that, you know, when we look at gender transformative change, we have to start with this idea, and then we do all of the wonderful things that other panelists have said that I won't go into more detail. But that's sort of the first point. You know, the second point is, I think what we've learned at Engender Health is that there's always something we can do to make something more gender responsive or more gender transformative. You know, going from gender harmful or gender sensitive all the way to transformative is a process. It takes time, as we know, but there's always something more we can do, right? So even oftentimes I think we have this idea of a shiny object, which is the perfect gender transformative program that works with all young people, all parents, all service providers, all teachers. And yes, that's true, but there are always things we can do. Things like, if we have community reflection activities, how do we integrate, gender box exercises? How do we integrate exercises that try to address gender beyond the binary? How do we address, power mapping and power walks, things that are pushing ourselves and the people we work with to really think about and reflect on more. And it may not be, the shiniest or prettiest gender transformative approach, but I do think there's always something that we can do towards more equitable participation and towards more reflection in what we do, even with all of our donor restrictions and constraints. So I think I will stop there and maybe pass it back to you and keep adding to the conversation later.
Thank you so much, Anna, for highlighting that there's always something that we can do if we want to change the narratives. And how we can do it is what we are discussing about today: adapting gender transformative approaches for sexual and reproductive health for young people. And it's a journey to learn, relearn, collaborate, and engage. Thank you so much to this group of panelists for actually answering the first set of questions. And once again, I will say, please feel free to keep on sharing your own reflections in the question and answer or even in the chat box. And I would like to acknowledge a comment that has been made by Ronald Ogal. Thank you so much. Ronald says, yes, gender transformative approaches recognizes that gender norms and power dynamics are key drivers of sexual and reproductive health outcomes, and that efforts to improve sexual and reproductive health must always, technology now playing its part, and I'm trying to move the chat. Okay, efforts must address these restrictive gender norms. Thank you so much for sharing your input. So I'm also hoping others will be able to just type in the chat or use the question and answer to make some reflections. So as we continue with the panel, I would like to also then invite again Athena, to Ola. Ola, why do you think it is imperative to ensure gender transformative approaches are at the center of the efforts in advancing feminist vision on sexual and reproductive health and rights agenda, particularly from a young feminist perspective? Over to you, Ola.
Thank you very much, Yasha. For those who haven't met Athena yet, Athena Network is a global feminist collective that works to advance gender equality and center the voices of adolescent girls and young women in the global response to HIV and AIDS. And in our very close engagement with young people, particularly adolescent girls and young women, we found that a gender transformative approach is not just an option, right? It's the way to go. I really agree with Ronald's comment in the chat about gender norms being at the center of SRH outcomes, right? For the first and, brightest reason, perhaps, it's more effective to organize programs and initiatives, SRH initiatives, sexual and reproductive health initiatives, that take into consideration power and gender dynamics. What we have in many countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, are programs like family education, some other similar interesting names and curriculum that are not fully reflective of the spectrum of comprehensive sexuality education that center, choice, that center respect, that address gender norms, that address power relations, gendered power relations. And research has actually shown that sexuality education programs that address power and gender relations are more likely to be successful over 5 times more successful than the ones that try to sidestep all of these critical issues. So it works, and that is one reason why we should do that, right? Then another thing is, there's the question of all of the agendas we have around SRH, right? There is, the SDGs in Africa. We have Agenda 2063 that sort of talk about young people, inclusion, and all of that. And we even have the Generation Equality Forum, the GEF, right? The more recent one within the feminist movement. But the thing is, do we keep on recycling agendas without actually looking in to see how we can do things differently in terms of programming, in terms of implementing these solutions, right? Someone once said that, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is the definition of insanity, right? And so we've seen that it is important to put power back in the hands of young people. When we talk about, advancing adolescent and youth sexual and reproductive health, many times you have people who are in the room who don't have that lived experience of, being young, experiencing how living out their sexual lives, plays out practically in the communities. And it's an issue because we've said over and over again that young people know what is best for their reality, right? And so a gender transformative approach actually helps us more effectively put power back in the hands of young people, particularly young women, adolescent girls, gendered minorities, and ensures that they are at the center of designing and implementing these programs to make them more effective. And finally, really, when we talk about a human right-based approach, when we talk about, centering human rights within putting the R in SRHR, making it prominent, right? The rights of young people, it really is the right thing to do. It really is what we should be doing, because you can't discuss the rights of someone without them having the power to influence the conversation, to dictate the pace of the conversation, and to influence progress. And so it's a matter of right, even though it's a matter of efficiency, it's a matter of achieving our goals, it's also a matter of right that we approach this SRHR for young people and adolescents with a gender transformative approach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much once again, Ola, for sharing from the perspective of a young feminist to say this is the right approach. This is actually the right way. If we're going to make sexual and reproductive health and rights a reality for young people, ensuring that young people themselves participate meaningfully and equally, it is the right thing to actually adopt a gender transformative approach, to look at this using a gender transformative approach lens. Thank you so much. And alongside, to add to that, what you have just said, I see a comment from Katanda Singwanza, who also adds on to say, in order to implement gender transformative approaches and ensuring programs do not cause harm, it's important to have tools such as gender marker to gauge our intervention, whether it is exploitative, accommodative, responsive, or transformative. Thank you so much for making those contributions that you're doing in the WhatsApp chat. Let's keep them up and alive. It makes the discussion more interactive. And please get ready to also raise up your hands whenever at some point you feel like you want to speak, as very soon we'll also be going to an open and interactive section where we can take some comments from the floor or some additions. So we move on, and I'd like to invite Anna to really share with us what have been some of the lessons learned that you can share in the application of the gender transformative approaches in your programs and organizations, particularly from a youth leadership perspective? What are the young people saying about everything that you have been leading and you have been implementing it in gender health? Over to you, Anna.
Thank you. Yeah, two points on this one, and really would like the discussion for everyone to chime in here. I think we have this tendency sometimes to want to look for the right answer, like what is the right gender transformative approach in the right context, and then we want to say, okay, when we find the answer, let's do it everywhere, let's scale it, and then all of a sudden everything will be fixed. And I think that the first lesson learned that we've, we learn over and over and over again. So I don't know how many times we have to learn it in order to make sure we do this, but there is no single magic example idea about a gender transformative approach that works everywhere all the time. And the reason why is because while we have gender inequitable norms, they exist everywhere in all of our societies in some way. They're very context specific, right? My gender specific inequitable norm may not, and probably isn't the same as Ola's, right? Because while there's some commonalities, there are also really, really context specific differences. And so we shouldn't ever expect there to be this magical idea that is going to get replicated everywhere. And I think we have to sort of just move away from the narrative that, we need to keep investing in all of these, big evaluations to say what is the best approach. I think the best approach comes from the communities that we work with. And yes, there are some guiding principles and frameworks and what we're talking about, but we have to just move away from saying that this work is clear cut. Here's your solution, here you go. And because that's not how rights-based programming works. If we really think about our sexual and reproductive health and rights with the R, as Ola mentioned, the R aspect of it. I've learned and we've learned that gender transformative approaches are messy sometimes, and they're not so clear cut as a sometimes logic model, results framework. They go above and beyond the indicators that we often measure that are related to gender transformative approaches. Because yes, it's about supporting people to access sexual and reproductive health care, but it's equally as important to say, measuring decision-making power, agency, ability to decide about many aspects of one's life. That's truly what gender transformative work is. But sometimes I think we conflate that with this idea that is it contributing to this ultimate result that is very health focused, for example. So I think gender transformative approaches we've learned that support individuals to make and exercise their rights in so many different ways. And the key is without interfering or impeding on other people's rights. And I think that's really important, especially with our Men as Partners work and our male engagement work. And the other lesson learned that I just wanted to share is that we really need to stop putting young people in boxes and gender transformative work or gender work in a box that creates this very narrow and unhelpful narrative about what is good and not good. And one example of this is we often have a tendency to stay away from, at least in some context, talking about gender as a spectrum, because sometimes we're afraid that some of our partners are that's a little too much, or oh, that's a little too taboo. But SRHR work in general is taboo, right? That's just how it is, and we know that young people in particular with comprehensive sexuality education have this incredible ability to understand complex topics, taboo topics. And in many cases, young people are more open to questioning, challenging, and changing these gender binaries. So of course we have a duty as for me and gender health and supporters and implementers and facilitators, we have a duty to ensure that we have our do no harm frameworks that are in place should unintended harm occur and to prevent unintended harm in the first place. But I don't think that should stop us from pushing for more truly gender transformative approaches that look at things beyond the binary, because I think young people are more prepared and more ready than we give them credit that they are. So I really, I would love to see no more boxes where please describe your gender transformative approach here, and please describe your youth approach here, and please describe your work with, people with a disability over here. It's all the same work, because ultimately at the end of the day, we're trying to transform those inequitable norms that are focused on power and who has power and who doesn't have power, and who has power, who uses power to exercise control, and who uses power to make decisions about their own lives and without that. So I really feel like that's like my one thing. Please stop putting everything in a box, because it's not helpful.
I think the message is very loud and clear, Anna. Thank you so much. Let's stop putting everything in boxes and understand that this is intersecting, and the intersectionalities are real as we talk about how do we support, how do we meaningfully engage young people in sexual and reproductive health and rights, and also thinking about what's the importance, especially looking at what are we measuring. This is beyond our usual indicators, but this has got to do with the rights of that young person. It's got to do with their sexual and reproductive health, and it's got to do with measuring their agency, their ability to make decisions. Thank you so very much, Anna. So I'll move on to Quraish. And Quraish, to you, given the focus of your work on transforming masculinities with men and boys, can you share with us what are some of the gender transformative approaches that Men Engage has put in place, particularly related to meaningful youth leadership and engagement? Over to you, Quraish.
Thank you very much, Nyasha. And at this point, I just wanted to share a few slides with our audience. Can Dina help me share slide number 10? So at Uganda Young Positives, we work with Men Engage Africa, but also Men Engage Alliance to implement a couple of projects. We do work with young people, and we come with the perspective of public health, and specifically young people living with HIV. And we believe that young people have the power to affect change by tracking the root of gender equalities, changing social and cultural norms and structures. We also continue to facilitate groups with gender transformative approaches, and also provide training and activities for young people, especially those living with HIV. We have had a number of GTA projects that have worked in the African region, specifically the East African region. And I'll just speak to slide 16. Dina, if you can just rush to slide 16. Recently, we've implemented a project with the Global Fund. It was called the Twake Project. And this project looks at, bringing young people together, sharing ideas on how they can influence the world, but also being part and partial of the change that we want to see. And we appreciate Men Engage Alliance and Men Engage Africa that gave us technical assistance in this project together with the Global Fund. Next slide, please. Now, in this particular slide, we have also gone ahead at the regional level to have the UCAN project. And this is implemented by grassroots youth-led organizations and movements in Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda. This received support to influence increased access of young people to comprehensive sexuality education, contraception and safe abortion services, and information to counter the opposition that obstructs and hinders young people's sexual reproductive health and rights. And we have now moved into phase 2 of the UCAN project, and it is giving us a lot of success. And this kind of success is what we want to demonstrate to the world, that when you trust young people, when you let them be part and parcel of the agenda, especially using the gender transformative approach lens, we can achieve better. It is easier to build boys and girls than to repair men and women. And for us as Uganda Young Positives, in collaboration with Men Engage Alliance, it is important that we start down there. We start with the young minds, but also continue to appreciate that these are people that are going to take the world to the next level. And it is important that we continue, having them on board and letting them be part and parcel of everything that we do. We can only achieve the gender transformative approach agenda with young people being at the center of this. And I would like to appreciate Men Engage Alliance for fast tracking and also facilitating this across different regions of the world. Over to you, Nyasha.
Thank you so much, Kraish, for sharing some of these examples and really emphasizing that if we definitely adopt gender transformative approaches, we are creating space for young people or an opportunity for young people to actually take the lead to organize the agenda and to even implement it, and doing all of that in our diversity. Thank you so much for all of you for answering these questions. At this point, I'd like to also invite all of you here who have joined us today, if you would like to say anything, share some reflections or some approaches, the transformative approaches and how they've worked in your context, I'd like to invite you to speak. And already I see there is a hand up and I'm trying to identify whose is it. Okay, so and for this, I'll be kindly asking you to speak in about 2.5 minutes so that we also create space for others. So over to you, Mohamed Abdi, to share some reflections and comments on all this.
Thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes, very much. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much for letting me do some say something. My name is Mohamed Abdi from Kenya. I closely follow Yield Hub, and I'm very grateful to be part of this meeting today, this webinar, which is very, very insightful for me. As a as a young and the young advocates of sexual reproductive health rights, I got my organization in the grassroots level. And in fact, the work we are doing there is very, very significant. And it's impacted in the community, which they are proud of it. I can see engaging with the young people in leadership position and providing them with the tools and resources they need to create change. Then youth-led organizations can have significantly impact on these matters of sexual reproductive health rights and HIV outcomes. I can say nowadays the whole world is saying youth inclusion, which they have seen it is very, very, very crucial, and it cannot be left anywhere. As a young leaders, I'm very proud of many, many, many young boys and girls who are advocating for the burning issues in our world today. And it's already seen that the impact they have in the community, in the national and in the international level. So my take is the meaningful youth participation and partnership is critical to reaching these sexual reproductive health and rights. I'm sorry for repeating this. I like it. SRHR. I like this because that is my work. In fact, that's what I do. We need to ensure the needs of young people are heard and understood to let this work be done. In fact, I got an organization back in 2020. It's called Solution-Based Organization that champions for young girls' rights. We also discourage school dropouts, and we fight against FGM in the grassroots level. Actually, this journey was the best journey I can say since I did my university. And
all right. Thank you so much, Mohamed. And I'm sorry to have put you on mute, but we are also being very mindful of the time. But we totally appreciate how you are coming through with an experience of sharing what you're doing with your own context, with your organization, and why it is really important for young people to be able to have the space to organize and coordinate the efforts that we need to see when it comes to gender transformative approaches in sexual and reproductive health. I would say well done for this amazing and great work, Mohamed. Let's continue to also interact beyond the spaces to think about collaborations and how we can get to work together and amplify the work you're doing. So at this stage, I hope it is okay that you could allow me to move on to the next speaker, and that is Katanda. Please go ahead, but also please not, you have 2.5 minutes. Over to you, Katanda.
Thank you. So my name is Katanta Simwanza. I work with Gender Health in Tanzania. So one of the things which is very important when we are implementing gender transformative approach, especially in SRHR, is to keep into consideration the element of gender transformative. There are 6 elements of gender transformative. One being, you need to know the norm which you want to address at the end of the day. And to address this norm, it's very important to conduct gender analysis, landscape analysis, so that you become aware of what you'll be addressing. But the second most important thing is to ensure that how are you going to involve girls, women, young women during the implementation of that project or interventions. And the third bit of it, which is very important, is how do we engage men, especially in promotion or in addressing that norm we want to address, which is impending the inequalities to women's, girls, and young women. That's very important also to keep into consideration. The fourth thing which to keep into considerations is the issue of biodiversities considerations. You know, when we talk about girls, there are different types of girls. The ones in school, out of school, the ones who had been experienced teenage pregnancy and things like this. The same applies to boys and men. So the consideration of biodiversities is very important. But the fifth thing, which is also very important, how do we positioning the women's, especially in decision-making, in leadership, in management, when we are addressing such kind of interventions at the end of the day. And the sixth element is about, when you want to address these norms, did you do scanning, the legal scanning, the frameworks, to understand what are the existing frameworks which will support or are causing barriers to that norm which you want to address at the end of the day. And this should be considered from locally, regionally, internationally. So to identify the positive, the available standard of procedures, guidelines, laws, policies, which will support you, or those ones which are posing barriers to addressing such norm. For example, in Tanzania, we are having this problem of child marriage. You see, the law of child and the law of marriage, they are like antagonistic each other. So that's why now we are sitting down, we are trying to sit down and talk together, try to find out. So understanding, as you are implementing the gender transformative approach, it's very important to understand those 3 core elements of gender transformative, which are very important. And together with the use of gender markers, the do no harm framework, I think we'll be able to address the challenge we want to address in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katanda. And I keep on hearing a lot of experiences and sharing around the resources we can use. So let me also invite to all those who have the links to these resources, the gender markers, the 6 steps that you just spoke about. Also feel free to be putting links in the chat that we can refer to after this call, after this kind of like delightful conversation we're having. And I'd like to also acknowledge there's a comment in the chat, then I'll go to Richard. So Zipporah Kamau also adds in the chat that gender transformative approaches can also address intersectional issues related to sexual and reproductive health and rights, such as the impact of poverty, ethnicity, and other forms of marginalization on access to SRHR services and information. This can help to ensure that all young people have equal access to sexual and reproductive health rights, services, and information. Thank you so much, Zipporah, for that comment. I will ask Richard to speak, and also please note you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Nasha. Mine is a question also to our panelists. So they've really enlightened us on what gender transformative approach means and what can be done. I want to know if there is an organization here, a young person here who is working in the field of SRHR. What practical steps or approaches or new ways can they begin to work that would begin to integrate some of the lessons that they've shared? Because it's an important topic and not everyone really recognizes the different aspect of it. So what should someone take away from this that they could begin to integrate into their own work, no matter how little? So this could go for any of the speakers or all of them.
Thank you so much, Richard, for the question. And that is very good question to say. How are we going then to just step out from this call and try to practicalize the adapting of gender transformative approaches in our work and ensuring diversity, equity, and all the things that we need for young people? So I think I will start with Anna. If you have something to share, you can quickly respond, then Ola, and then Kuraish.
Sure. I'll put this in the chat. Thank you, Dr. Gatanta, who helpfully reminded me. So, I mean, 3 resources that we are happy to share and are open to everyone that we use. They're not perfect, but I think in the spirit of learning and growing, we have our Gender, Youth, and Social Inclusion, or we call it GYSI, analysis framework and toolkit. And that really speaks to the points made that I think in the chat, multiple people talked about, gender analysis being very critical. So our GYSI analysis really tries to look at from more of an intersectional lens with power at the center. It includes, of course, all of the key good practices from gender analyses that exist out there, but it also goes we like to think a little more deeper into other aspects of people's lives, gender included, but also other things like age, but also other topics. So we are happy to share that, and that's something that hopefully is an actionable thing that if you're working on a program and you, whether it's new or existing, you can always use elements of the GYSI analysis framework and toolkit to ensure that you are really identifying those specific norms in your context that you want to change. The second one I'll share is the GYSI marker, and this is to the point about it's an internal accountability tool for ourselves that help us and our teams assess the degree of integration that we're working towards. And it looks at 5 criteria: analysis, activity, participation, negative effect, and M&E. So I'll put it in the chat. Again, it's not something like an external evaluation, but it's really focused on, are we putting in the right things into a program or a project or an initiative where we could expect more gender responsive or transformative change? And then the third one is my, I think what I talked about at the beginning, the our Do No Harm framework. And that's really key. I think everyone who works in this space should really, continually revisit their do no harm frameworks. And if for whatever reason it doesn't exist, creating one if it doesn't, because I think it's really our duty as we are accountable if we're working on this to the communities that we work in, and we're accountable to preventing harm as much as possible, and then mitigating anything that happens if harm does occur. So I'll put the 3 links in the chat, and we can go from there.
Yasha, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
Yes, and then I realized technology is happening again. So thank you so much, Anna, for sharing. Ola, any reflections?
Yes, just building on what Anna has said about accountability, I think that, you know, the youth-led and youth-centered organizations that are here today should be very intentional about not perpetuating the same systems that we're trying to transform, the same systems that we critique within our own organizations. And it can be very easy to sort of sidestep some of this power dynamics, some of these issues, realizing that we're in a very critical position as people who advocate, as people who provide services, as people who lead implementation of initiatives in our communities and for our constituents, right? So just being very introspective, taking our time to engage with ourselves and with others within the space to ensure that we're not really perpetuating all those inequalities that we're fighting. Whose voice are we listening to, for instance? How are we creating an enabling space for young people of all types, young people in all their diversity? Because when we say we're youth-led, which youth are we representing? You know, thinking about youth that are, you know, routinely left on the sidelines, and trying as much as possible to bring them into the core of our programming. And lastly, to share our power as well, because we do have power at some level, and it's important that we keep looking back and trying to share our power. And I have to say, kudos to Yield Hub for creating the action learning group that Athena joined last year, where we were able to engage with Engender Health, Men Engage, Restless Development, and Kami Fund. And we were able to identify some of the issues that we were struggling with. You know, we brought a lot of, you know, vulnerability in the room, a lot of humility to really look at our processes and say, you know, this is how we can do better. This is how we can be more inclusive. This is how we can bring in more diverse voices into the work that we do. So I would say staying critical of ourselves really is important, ensuring that we self-check and we engage with other like-minded organizations to plug those gaps and to do better generally.
Thank you, Ola. Quraish, any reflections?
Yeah, thank you very much. Just to answer the question from one of the colleagues who asked, what should we take home? I think it is important for us to apply gender equality and social inclusion in everything that we do as organizations. And this does not cost much. You may not need necessarily resources to apply this. I'll just share an example. That to us as Uganda Young Positives, while we coordinate and mobilize young people living with HIV for action in scaling up prevention care and support services, everything that we do it with a gender lens. We want to ensure that there's gender equality. We want to ensure that there's social inclusion in everything that we do. And therefore, our staff members, but also the beneficiaries of the organization, come in with that knowledge, come in with that aspect, and we emphasize it from mobilization to implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. And therefore, we can take this as a best practice and share it across the spectrum. Let every one of us who has attended this webinar and the members that we work with, let us appreciate gender transformative approach and also always apply the lens of being gender equal partners and also share as much knowledge as we have on this to many others that we meet out there. Thank you, and over to you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Quraish, Ola, and Anna, and everyone else who was on this call with us today, and for all those interactions we have had. I think this has been one of the most enlightening conversations that I've ever moderated, because I'm just sitting here myself and saying, wow, are we doing enough? Or there's actually more that we can do, considering that there is no blanket approach on what is gender transformative approaches, but we do have an understanding of what is it that we would want to achieve. So from this side where I'm seeing, I'm sure we've all had what the panelists had to share, the kind of resources that we're also sharing together as a space to learn, relearn, and collaborate around how we can really adapt gender transformative approaches. To also all of us remember that this is actually a journey, and we're not going to be putting this in boxes, but also approach this recognizing the various intersectionalities that young people have, the various needs that rise from those intersectionalities, and recognizing the diversities of young people and ensuring that all young people are included. And the way we can do this is definitely the gender transformative approaches way. So at this point, I would like to really acknowledge everyone who has been in this space and to say, this is not the end of our conversation. Let's definitely use the different spaces that we have, including the Twitter, WhatsApp, etc., for us to continue having this conversation on how we can really push for the adoption of gender transformative approaches. Because what we did here was to really kickstart the conversation and unpack where exactly is this happening, so that others do have an experience that, hey, this is a reality. This is not just a talk show. So thank you so much, everyone. And at this point, I would like to invite, that must be Dina from UDAP, to also give us the round off of this conversation, sharing the action points on what we can do next in order for us to continue engaging through the UDAP and Men Engage. Over to you, Dina, as we close out.
Thank you so much, Nyasha. And thank you so much for everybody. For this round of the closing, I would also just like to invite, because there is a Yield Hub manager here, there is David. So that for the Yield Hub part, like we have this action learning group as well, and also all the social media session that we have, and we just shared everything there in our website. People can also see and then just like read everything from there. But more than that, I would like also to invite David to have a call to action for this.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Dina, and thank you so much, Nyasha, as well, for the moderation and for the speakers for a wonderful panel. I echo your comment, Nyasha, that this is one of the most inspiring panels that I have been listening to. This was very nice. I always learn something new in terms of gender every time that I hear these amazing people speaking. We had Ola from Athena Network joining our podcast last in November, our Twitter space. And yeah, I mean, it was super interesting to hear more about how young people can engage in gender-based violence, for example. And now hearing about gender transformative approaches is something that I'm learning something new every day. Although I'm involved in the SRHR space, I think that gender is something that is particularly evolving all the time, and there's something new always to learn. So thank you so much, everyone. I wanted to give some background on how the Yield Hub started working on gender. So the Yield project, which is the predecessor of the Yield Hub, launched a report in 2019, which was highlighting the issues of youth participation in the SRHR field. So this report outlines, for example, tokenism, exploitation, lack of compensation, and so on. But then there was also a second paper that was launched after this initial report, which was the gender paper. And this paper, this report actually highlights how the experiences of young men and young women are different when they are trying to engage in the SRHR space. For example, young women facing more discrimination, more harassment, lack of opportunities, and so on. So I invite you to take a look at the report on the website, but we also recently launched a blog, which I just posted on the chat, which explains all these issues that I'm mentioning right now in a way that is more friendly, I would say. So I invite you to take a look at this blog. And then, so this is how the work in gender started for us. But then when we became the Yield Hub last year and we launched the initiative, our first action learning group, which included, like Ola mentioned, Athena Network, Resident Development and Gender Health, Kami Fund, and Men Engage Alliance. So we focus on gender because we said, okay, this is an important topic that the yield report already highlighted. So we said, okay, let's focus on gender. And when we started this group, the group started discussing, okay, this report is very much binary focused and this is kind of outdated in a way, which I totally agree. I think that yes, as I said before, gender is constantly evolving, and the group decided to focus on intersectionality, which was something that was very, very interesting for me because I realized that yes, there's always something new that we can do. And in this case, like Anna also mentioned before, we need to stop putting everything in boxes. And I think that in gender is the same case. So when the group decided to focus on intersectionality, that was something that was kind of groundbreaking for me because it was something that was new, was evolving, and it reflected how the field is changing all the time. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share these remarks. In terms of follow-ups on how to stay engaged with the Yield Hub and our groups, I invite everyone to take a look at our website and also follow us on social media. That's where we are posting all of our initiatives. We just closed the calls for applications for our action learning groups. However, there will be more opportunities to engage in the upcoming months through different activities that we'll carry out. Also, if you're going to attend the Women Deliver conference, please look for us on the exhibition booth. We'll have a booth on the conference, and we'll also have a side event. So more on that later. Please do check our website and also sign up for our newsletter, where we'll be sharing more information about this. Thank you so much, everyone, and back to you, Nyasha.
Again, on mute. Thank you so much, Dick, for these remarks. And all those who are wondering how you could also connect with Mending Alliance, we invite you to also check out our website. We have across the world and with over 1,000 partnerships. So if you check on our website, you find out more information of how you can be part of actually the regional, the country networks that exist, and be part of the regional networks. And then also very soon we shall be issuing a very wide survey to really find and engage other young people within the Men Engage Alliance on transforming masculinities. So definitely we look forward to continue these conversations and engaging. So from me and the entire team from UDAP, who were behind the scenes coordinating this session and the webinar, and also the team from Men Engage Alliance, I'd like to say thank you so much for taking your time to join us today. May you have a lovely morning, depending on where you are, a lovely day, a lovely afternoon, or a good evening. Thank you so much, and let's continue the interactions. Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone,
Bye.
have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Have a good morning, afternoon, and evening.
Bye to everyone.